Thank you, and I also want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this. This research is a departure for me and a return, as you'll perhaps see. So I want to talk about, I just want to start this by quoting Luker about what is method and what is research. And she suggests that the twin goals of method are to create a research design where, one, you can be surprised by your findings, and two, others can be persuaded by them. But persuasion, this justification of the research process, always occurs within certain ideologies, ontologies, epistemologies. Effective persuasion depends on our understanding, implicit or explicit, of what matters, what exists, the relations of our consciousness to those things. So this is just pointing out the perhaps obvious that research questions, politics, theory, and method are always entwined. And in particular, the political economy of academic research constrains research in particular ways. It makes certain questions difficult to ask, certain phenomena difficult to notice, and it does this for three reasons. First, things may be unsayable within a politically structured discourse. As Hunter puts it, powerful political structures train us to listen, speak, see, and feel in specific ways that often exclude the possibility of recognizing people and actions, animals and environments that do not fit the parameters of those structures. So that's one limitation to any kind of research. Second, some relations, entities, and perceptions may be emergent, they may be slippery, they may not yet be fixed or nameable, thus making them difficult to name or talk about. Thirdly, understandings may be tacit, embodied, or understood in a way beneath or beyond the realm of language. So what I did recently was to go to performance, go to theatrical performance as a way of foregrounding difficult to articulate theoretical engagements and materializing them in an embodied way. That is, I looked to theater for a way of engaging the unsayable while maintaining a certain credibility. So why theater? I was trying to use theater to produce, extend, and critique theory, in particular surveillance theory, because it can activate an alternative discursive structure. It frees the researchers to name, to gesture toward, to create entities and relations outside of expert frameworks. It provides a release from rational argument. Does that have sort of meaning to me anyway?
No,
Okay.
it's not something to do with me. I
All
don't
right.
know that.
Okay. Excuse me. It provides a release from rational argument and instead calls on different disciplines of honesty and of truth. The discipline of the actor, the performance artist, or the improviser includes the embrace of and skill in, and this is how I understand the discipline of acting and theater and performance. The expertise of the actor, the improviser, the performer. Collaboration, communication, and collective ways of knowing, a focus on shifting relationships rather than static entities. Discipline in finding and elaborating conflict and tension, that's theater. The embodiment and embrace of the tacit, there's no necessity to say it, you do it. And the holding in abeyance of logic and abstraction. And finally, and I think the most importantly for me, the playing it as it lays, reevaluating assumptions, reframing worlds to encompass phenomena. This is, again, I am an actor. And so this calls on my training as an actor. To be honest about what is happening. What is happening is what is happening, and you're wishing it to be otherwise is going to give you a shitty performance. All right? You have to deal with what is there. So I was hoping that by engaging the practical consciousness and critical reflection of performers, and including the audience, by articulating through engagement rather than abstraction, focused and devised theater can generate unpredicted insight. Now, in this sense, it's like any method, like any survey, like an experiment. It is explicitly contrived with a focus and a purpose, a theoretical framework, and a set of mechanisms for creation of the as yet unknown. So what did we do? This is my sabbatical project, and we is one thing. If that's not clear, it will be by the end of this. This is the Carnivalesque in action. My what can I call him? A colleague. I had a colleague descended on me like a godsend, and I don't invoke God often, but what could I do? It was miraculous that this person came into my life. And he was an actor and a theater person going into his PhD studies, and I was a tenured professor going back to theater and on sabbatical. And I thought, well, this can work. So we assembled a team of collaborators. This included a surveillance scholar, that's me, a dramaturg, that's Michael, my colleague, 2 actors, a dancer, a visual and projection artist, a data wrangler, and a small audience. We wanted to find a statistician or somebody who could do data visualization, and we could not. So we then engaged in 4 days of table work, that is introductions over a collaborative dinner. We read theoretical work that was selected by me. In this way, it was rather like a seminar. I was trying to lay out the theoretical framework, the theoretical landscape that I wanted to explore. And this included, my particular model, the model of surveillance that I've been articulating over the years, and a suggestion of what were particularly interesting and understudied areas within that model. And so the things that we were sort of coming up with, that I was priming the pump with, actually, were things like, how are data made to mean? Okay, you got all this data. How does meaning come out of that data? For example, excuse me, what's a like? A Facebook like. What is that? What does that mean? How is it made to mean? How is it made to have value? And that kind of stuff. How are norms internalized was another question that was interesting to me. Another question that's sort of been perennially interesting to me are what are the avenues and pleasures of refusal, of the outsider status, of the one who refuses classification or is for some reason difficult to classify. And always with an attention to choice and resources. All right, the actors are situated differently. They have different resources available to them, but they're always able to make choices of some kind, and things could always have been otherwise. How did it happen to become thus? So after sort of laying out that, talking about stuff like that, we had 10 days of rehearsal. And this included, first, we would give gifts to each other of our expertise. We would work on solos, and we would discuss those solos and discuss how they were interrelated, what they had to do with each other, how they spoke to each other. Very quickly, actually, we fixed on themes. And the themes that we agreed on, Power always ran, and I paid the check. I signed the checks. The themes we agreed on were contortion into legibility, which was I happen to love, and the pleasures of the outsider. Excuse me. So from then on, all of the work that people would do, I would basically come along and say, "That's really interesting. Talk to me about how that's contortion into legibility. Talk to me about how that's the pleasure of the outsider." And then my colleague would say, "Stop asking them to talk." And we'd go from there. Thank you. Then we fixed a title, which was Work and Play at the Threshold of Legibility. And then we fixed the structure. All of this sort of under the gun. We had 10 days. And so the structure was there was going to be a moment of entry and enrollment into the spectrum. The audience would enter, the audience would be enrolled, and then there would be an introduction. And the audience would be told what was going on. And specifically, the audience would be invited into tests of legibility. The audience would be invited to be read by us in various ways. And so there were these 3 tests, and we tried to make them painful or in some way difficult to conform, difficult to be read by whatever it was that was trying to read us. And yet we wanted to give pleasures and rewards for submitting for submitting to this and to being read successfully. And so we fashioned spectacles. That was the next stage of this. Act 2, I guess, would be fashioning spectacles. And for each spectacle, we wanted to create an insider and outsider status. So the audience, some of the audience would, depending on how we had read them, would be invited into certain spectacles. Others, they would be barred from those. Others would be barred from those spectacles. But even the ones who were barred from it would somehow have a different perspective on it. And then we'd have a big finish, and the big finish was something for everybody. Anyway, so after fixing that structure, we tried to clean it up and make it a show. So this is what happened. This is what happened. Now, I hope you look at this and say, that looks like fun, because this was so much fun, I can't tell you. This was so much fun. This is my colleague Michael. Without whom none of this would have been possible. And so we had this space that Michael arranged to get. It's run by the Center for Drama Studies at the university. And we just started working with the space and working with these ideas and writing stuff down and drawing lines between them and having coffee and stuff like that. And so we would ask ourselves a question like, what is the background against which we measure aberrance? That was one of the ideas at first. We thought, let's build an aberrance monitor. How would we monitor aberrance? And I think that's a really pretty interesting question, actually. And how do we measure aberrance? So we talked about that for a while. And then we would ask questions like, well, is there a moment in this show, in this space, where one group gets to watch another watching something else? And as we got closer to the deadline, these questions got more and, actually this was a more theoretical one. This idea of hijacking actuarial knowledge or hijacking the actuarial process. What does that mean? How do we do that? And then it got to be, let's make a show, please. So we would say, what is the fiction? What are the entrances? What are we doing here, for God's sake? And I need a pointer, all right? I need a pointer. And Elise needs a bar, for Christ's sake. So, and then we would get to, that's my handwriting there. We came to this structure for the show. So we'd have these tests that would, again, ask people to contort themselves into legibility, and then we'd have these spectacles that made insider-outsider distinctions, and they were themed around surveillance. This is the enrollment process that people would enter, and they would be given guest IDs, 12-digit hexadecimal number, and they would be told that although they were on the invitation list, we weren't linked, they would be referred to by their guest ID. And because there was going to be no link between their guest ID and their name, we're not collecting any personally identifiable information, and so none of this was covered by privacy law. Welcome. And then we closed the desk. He was just sitting there in the middle, pretending to be our data broker and our multinational data broker and analytics firm. This is the introduction with Netta talking about 19th century photography and the emergence of the grid and the emergence of Bertillon and Muybridge and time and motion studies and this idea of being made visible against a grid. And then she invited the audience to make themselves. We have, grids are now far, not so much visual anymore. Here they are all over. Make yourself. So these are our legibility tests. This was a psychometric survey, just a choice. Tattoos or piercing? And they couldn't answer other. This was fabulous. This was a beautiful, beautiful piece. This was a test where if the person had to hold perfectly still, or else the image would fracture behind them. So as the person actually moved their face, the image behind them would fracture. And so it was very difficult for the individual to stay there and be read, because even their breath would cause the image to fracture. That's another person doing the same thing. This was a sarcasm meter. I never quite understood what that was about. Right, and so then we went to the spectacles. And so we drew up a list of the guests who were permitted in each spectacle. This was one of the spectacles, which was Netta. Elise, the younger woman in front, used to be a competitive dancer, a pastime I didn't know existed. but she was a competitive dancer. And so this was her dancing on a rope with Netta screaming at her, "Your toes aren't pointed, up, up, you could do this yesterday." It was a awful piece. It was really disturbing. That's me being disturbed. Another of the spectacles was an invitation to the satisfaction of shameful desires. It didn't work real great, but you would be invited in and you would get a choice. Just little PowerPoint presentations of either Barbara Streisand or luxury things or sweets or plane crashes. All of these things that I kind of enjoy but are somehow, I hate to admit it. So you could come into this darkened room and your shameful pleasures would have been chosen, especially for you, and you get to choose from the ones that we selected for you. But outside of that, there was also a camera looking at the person watching the shameful pleasures, and you could watch the person watching the shameful pleasures. That's Andrew Clement. He asked me to be sure that you knew that was not a crack pipe, that he was. All these spectacles had gatekeepers. This is Monty keeping gate. This is another of our spectacles. This is Michael doing the blind painter, and he would be in this room and he would blindfolded and he would tactily feel objects in the room and then go paint them. Again, all blindfolded. And these objects included participants. So the audience would come in and he would smear them with paint and then smear the canvas with paint. And then we pretended that we were doing stuff and give certain gifts to. We pretended actually that we were separating the audience into demographic types and gave each demographic type a prize, one of which was a slow dance with Michael. But we had one big prize for everybody because we know what everybody's going to enjoy. It's the Macarena. So we gave them the Macarena. So, all right. Other than a lot of fun, was it successful for what I wanted it to do? I want to say that, in some ways not. One thing was, for 10 days, god damn it, it was good work. I really want to say, it was astonishing just that we got something of this quality up in 10 days. And also, we're having so much fun, how could it not be a good thing? And I kind of mean that seriously. It was a sketch. It was kind of an idea thing. We just went with ideas because that was what we had, and we were opening in 5 days. So the idea we had was the idea we went with. So I have actually a lot of hope for it as a full-fledged project. Because certainly as pedagogy, for the performers, for all of the collaborators, it was amazing. It was an amazing pedagogic experience. It was the best seminar I have ever been involved in. And I mentioned this to one of the collaborators, and she said, "How much do you pay your seminar students?" And oh, okay. I mean, they got a chunk of change for giving me 2 weeks of their time. My collaborators. Thank you, Shirk. For the audience, I actually do think I think that this was a great, I think this was a very useful pedagogic experience. I really do think it framed and displayed issues in surveillance that most of our audience, and this is a sophisticated audience of most of my colleagues, who really had not thought of it that way. All right, so I feel very pleased that way. As research, did it irritate theory? I don't think it did, frankly. Because, and I think this is almost all because of the time constraints. I came in and imposed the model on stuff. I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do contortion into legibility. That was my idea. That didn't come from any kind of collaborative frisson of interdisciplinarity. What? But I really do think that it would work if we had more time, because the stuff that was going on, particularly with Michael and that blind painter thing is rich. It's rich, and I don't know what's in there, And also the fracturing of the face thing, that too. There's a lot there. And also just simply the way I was interacting with both Monty, who was the fracturing guy, and Michael, I thought that there's stuff to come out of this. so we did fall back, I think, on our various expertises, our various vocabularies, our various power relations. But again, I think it was great. And I am going to take 30 seconds here to explain how I got here. I have found writing always to be torturous, all right? And I got tenure, and I thought, it became impossible. I thought, I can't do this anymore, and I don't have to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. It was an issue. It was a real issue, right? And I thought, well, am I going to quit my job? How can I responsibly be an academic who doesn't write? And I'm looking for a way out of that. And in God's truth, I'm looking for a way out of that. That's kind of why I'm here. And I also have gone back to acting because I love it. I love it. And so I thought, well, there's got to be a way to be a responsible academic, earn my salary, and do this. Now, luckily, I'm quite happy with my salary. I'm quite happy with my rank. I don't want a raise. I don't want a promotion. All right, because I don't think this work is legible. I don't think I can contort this work into the legibility that will allow its impact to be measured. All right, or created, or whatever this impact thing is. So I cannot, in good conscience, say to all you PhD students, why don't you do this for your dissertation? But I can, in good conscience, say I'm not going to quit my job, and I'm going to keep doing this because I think it's valuable, even though, as I say, it's only a sketch now, and it's an entirely new way of doing research for me. So that's it. Thank you.